Hello everyone. It's been a while, or what has felt like a while, but I've been pretty busy between the holidays, juggling stuff in real life, and my CSM duties. For those not aware, I was selected by CCP to be on the CSM this year for CSM 18. So for this video, I'll be going over some polarized fits. I know I do a lot of what seems like a lot of polarized stuff, but I found it to have some advantages while solo roaming. You can output more DPS and clear targets faster than may be expected, and it enables a bit more fitting freedom compared to non-polarized. The downside is you are more obviously easier to kill in most cases. However, in the current state of solo roaming, especially in Lowsec, the ability to kill things fast is more important than surviving long term, at least in most cases when brawling. Because the longer you stay tackled and unable to kill something, the more likely it is for you to get dogpiled by a blob coming through an Ansiblex, Sino, or wherever. So the first fit I'll talk about is the Crow. So you guys are most likely familiar with my previous video on the Crow. So this is going to be kind of a quick refresh. I'm not going to really dive into the huge details on how to fly this because it's very similar to the Crow in my previous video, but there are a couple differences here, primarily being that this is afterburner only and that you have two medium shield extenders on this instead of just one. So for one, you're kind of having to use some secret tech here, which is the civilian afterburner. A lot of people kind of overlook the 1MN civilian afterburner, but this is actually really useful on interceptors and, to be honest, pretty much any frigate as long as it's not extremely slow or plated down. Civilian afterburners have extremely low fitting requirements. So as you can see here, it's just one power grid and 2 CPU compared to, I think it's like 10 power grid. Let's see, let's check here. For a Tech 2, 11 power grid and 15 CPU. So as you can see, it's a pretty significant difference. On a interceptor, yeah, you do lose a little bit of speed. So I mean, if we look at it real quick right now, we're at 923 with a civilian AB, and we go to Tech 2 and you're at 1400. So there is a big speed difference here. But with this primarily being used in nullsec, 900, 1,000 meters a second is still plenty to take advantage of the vast majority of targets in nullsec being micro warp drive only. The other advantage here is that you can actually abyssal roll civilian afterburners extremely easy and extremely cheaply, because even if you mess up on fitting, it doesn't matter because it's just one power grid and 2 CPU. So even if you get a terrible roll on both fitting, the scheme of things, it's a very minor difference in the power grid and CPU requirements. Now moving on from that, we have the double medium shield extenders. So that's kind of the reason why I use the civilian afterburners, because I wanted to polarize the Crow and to really take advantage of the new to me, shield hit point bonus, which synergizes extremely well with polarized fits. I wanted to try to cram 2 medium shield extenders on. So that civilian afterburner allowed me to do that. And that gives me 7,500 hit points with the extenders, and then with a T2 rig. Then the rest of it's just a power grid, BCU, and a loading bay accelerator, which gives you 214 DPS, which most people don't expect out of Crow. Now granted, 214 DPS isn't, in the current age of Eve isn't a ton of DPS, but out of a fleet interceptor that no one really expects it to do any damage, you can definitely take a lot of targets by surprise with it. So in this fight with the Crow, I come across a Saber camping a gate, so I just go ahead and warp directly into the bubble and start to burn away because I expect the Saber is going to try to follow me here, and which he does. It doesn't take him long to catch up with me, but I have the afterburner, and since he's micro warp drive only, I still have full range control even though he has a web. This Saber was actually a little differently fit because it was a bling scram, and I think it had a bling web as well, and then just a single medium shield extender. So I was able to mitigate a lot of his damage, and he wasn't quite as tanky as a normal saber that used the dual medium shield extenders. I end up getting slightly out of slightly out of my range with a rage, so I kind of burned back in, and I see that he is dropping low, so I kind of go ahead and pull my orbit in a little bit closer, just so I can keep damage on. I'm pretty confident he doesn't have the DPS to break through the rest of my tank here. However, through all this, I don't see the Loki decloak and warp down. You know, it is what it is. Get kind of focused or tunnel vision on the target. So the Loki ends up tackling me at this point. But I noticed that he's actually pretty close to me, so I just, at this point I'm already tackled. I might as well see if I can tackle the Loki, at which point I am able to tackle the Loki. However, I have rage missiles loaded right now, which without a web and with the crow not having the explosion velocity bonus anymore, actually they apply poorly to drones and even other interceptors. So I'm not doing a ton of damage to the drones here, and he does the right thing where he actually starts pulling drones one at a time. So I'm not able to really kill any drones here, but I'm at least able to force them off, which is preventing the DPS from really doing a whole lot. And because I have so much shield hit points, I actually have a really good passive regen on this, amusingly. So it kind of self-tanks the drones, or at least the drones that are left on field, so I'm not really bleeding any lower in my shield amount. And, you know, at this point I'm just trying to defang to see if I can actually do any damage to the Loki. The few times I have shot the Loki so far, it seems like he instantly repaired. And I did look up his fit after I died, and it was like a medium shield booster fit, which doesn't tank a lot, but again, I'm doing 200 DPS, so he doesn't need to tank a lot to tank me. So at this point, I actually start putting some DPS on the Loki, and as you can tell, he's just instantly repping. So I don't think there's much hope here in actually breaking him, unless somehow he capped out. So at this point I go ahead and reload to just Faction Scourge so that I can apply to the drones, because as you can see he popped them all back out. And yeah, now with Faction Scourge I'm able to immediately melt these drones without any issues. And from here a Stratios then jumps through the gate to support him, to save him from the ever dangerous crow. And at this point it's kind of the end of it for me. There's not a whole lot I can do here between the Stratios that's now going to pressure me with drones. And you know, so I try to kind of burn off a little bit at an angle to see if I can try to get a warp off, but at that point then the Loki actually finally starts tracking me with artillery, and then what's left of the Stratios drones completely destroy me. Amusingly though, I did end up tanking over 13,000 damage with this crow in this fight.
Warp drive active.
Now this is the ship I probably had the most fun with and the most, quote unquote good fights with while making this video. So this is a Stabber fleet issue, which I've polarized, and kind of following along with how the Stabber fleet issue is normally flown. A lot of fits are normally dual prop or AB only, and if we go back far enough, maybe even still gets used a little bit today, but you still would also have the normally plated Stabber fleet issue that had like 40,000 EHP when it actually had resistances. So this is kind of based on that same mentality, and the reason why the Stabber fleet issue was strong in that role, or used to be strong in that role, is because it has a fairly small signature radius. It's got a 100-meter signature radius. So this means that if you can keep up speed while brawling with it, you can mitigate a lot of damage. And the Stabber fleet issue also has a tracking bonus, so that means you can actually apply with hail while maintaining a tight orbit to mitigate damage yourself, but then you're still applying a good chunk, if not all of your DPS against a target. And when I was kind of building it, and this kind of goes along with any polarized fit, you get to a point where you can't get any more hit points out of the fit. And so you're looking for more ways to survive. So in this circumstance, I kind of built upon the Stabber Fleet issues, low signature radius, and then on top of that, I then added the tracking disruption. So we have a tracking disruptor in the mids. This is going to forego like a micro warp drive or anything like that, because again, I'm even though I only have 23,000 hit points, by combining that low signature with tracking disruption or missile disruption, you can really extend that hit points, even to the point where sometimes you're not getting hit at all. So this, in a way, gives you a higher tank than what the numbers kind of show. And you just kind of have to play it by ear in terms of, what you're fighting. Because normally how I flew this is I would have a mobile depot with me, and I would swap to either the missile guidance disruptor or the tracking disruptor, depending on the ship that I came across, essentially trying to hard counter what I found. Sometimes it didn't work that way. Sometimes the fight started before I could switch anything. But I still at least had the low signature to fall back on. And again, these are primarily being, this was only being flown in Nullsec. So again, this is AB only. It just gave me the fitting that I needed, because I still needed a ancillary current router. But since I have limited mids, I just wanted to use on the main tackle points, and I just only wanted to brawl with this. So it was all dictating how the fights came into me to set up the fight, and just rolled with it. The fitting is fairly straightforward. We've got polarized 425s, AB, scram web, TD, triple gyro, Imperial Navy 1600, again just to get that extra little bit of HP or hit points out of it. And then you have 2 layered energized membranes. Every time I post a polarized fit, people are like, why are you using resistance mods? And these are not resistance mods. Layered membranes give you armor hit point bonus percentage, so these are just stacking even more armor hit points. And then we have 2 Trimarks, T1 Trimarks. You could go T2, but with a polarized fit, it's not really worth it in most cases. It just feels like, extra money, and T2 Trimarks aren't exactly cheap, and the benefit you really gain out of it isn't as much as you'd expect. Like if we do it here, let's just throw on some T2 Trimarks. Most of the time it's maybe 1,000 hit points of a difference. So let's see. Yeah, so we're at 24.8. And then we go to Tech 1 Trimarks and 23.3. So slightly over 1,000 extra hit points. And you're, I think these are like 30 mil a piece or something compared to the Tech 1s, which are under 10 mil normally. So again, just not really worth it in terms of the price. But yeah, this works very well as long as you can kind of start the fight where, fighting on a gate, maybe getting the land on top of you in an ESS. You can even maybe pull them into the ESS with you depending on the situation. But yeah, it's quite effective. So this fight started with me actually annoying some Ishtars, and actually, they got me pretty low health, so I jumped out of that system, which is a dead-end system, and ran into this broadsword. So with the this kind of showcases how well the synergy between the afterburner, low sig, and tracking disruption works against this broadsword. He's not able to hit me with his guns, and because this is Nullsec and this is a Nullsec heavy interdictor, they're almost always going to just be loaded with guns and hail. So I doubt he had any tracking ammo on him, which also helped me a lot. So I pretty much probably only had a couple thousand HP, but I was able to get out there and kill the hick with it. So this fight starts where I was in horde space, and I was just kind of sitting on a gate, and I saw this guy coming to local, so I just waited on the gate, and he warped in right on top of me. So I decided, well, why not? Let's just shoot right at 0 and see if he'll jump through or not. He did not jump through. He aggressed back. This is a triple newt Vedmak, and the big thing here is that this is actually an officer fit Vedmak. So he's got an officer gun, and he's completely or mostly completely abyssal rolled. So I actually don't know the full value of the fit. But it's the first time I've killed something with an officer module equipped. The main thing here is that he has these triple newts, which are all abyssal rolled, which are capping me out extremely quickly before I can really do anything. TD isn't really doing much because I'm burning right at him at this point. But I was able to kill him right as my scram went down. And yeah, and so like I looted him. I didn't really think anything of it because I was just like, oh, there's just a few things in the cargo. It is what it is. You know, I killed a Vedmak with some abyssal stuff, but it wasn't until I actually looked at the fitting to see that, oh, this is this is an officer fit. So that was kind of a surprise, and again, it just kind of showcases how useful it is, or how much people are caught unaware when you're in a polarized fit and the kind of damage that you can do. This next fight was against a Navy Executor. I was on a gate, he warped down, so I went ahead and jumped through the gate so he would follow. And so I'm trying to get it set up to where, you know, I'm able to basically capture him with the afterburner. So I pretend that I'm burning back to the gate, or, well, I'm not pretending, I actually am, because I'm AB only. If he gets to the point where he just kites out really far away, then there's no point in me trying to chase him, because I'm not going to catch him. But in this case, he does jump through, and then he decloaks, and then he does end up getting close to me, or he burns close to me, I guess, to try to instigate me to fight, but he ends up putting himself off of the gate, so he's not able to get back to it either. So yeah, he decloaks here, he kind of starts burning in close. I do hesitate a little bit because I'm expecting him to kind of slingshot back out, but he doesn't, so I go ahead and grab him at the last second and pull him back in. You know, I'm burning right at him. He's a railgun fit, so he does hit me a couple times, but you know, again, it doesn't really matter because once I can set up my orbit, he's not going to hit me. You know, once I at least get safely to the point where I'm not worried about him coasting out of my range, I start to kind of angle a little bit to mitigate a little bit of the damage. But you know, at that point, we've got 1,000 DPS on a Kaidi rail Nexeq, so it's not really going to do a whole, you know, it's pretty straightforward in terms of him dying. So in this fight, I actually was just kind of roaming through a system, kind of going to my next area, and I ran across a guy ratting in a Praxis, and he wanted to fight me, and you know, I'm not going to turn it down, so I refit to Missile Guidance Disruptor because most PvE Praxises are going to be fit with either Rapid Heavies or Cruise Missiles. But the thing I forgot is that Praxises are also fit with, or they also are bonus to drones. So even though the Praxis wasn't really doing a whole lot of damage to me through its missiles, I was struggling against the drones. So I try and swap my web and my guns onto the drones to try and kill them quickly. But then the other issue that crops up here is that I end up not having, or I run out of cap. Or I start to run out of cap because of the heavy newt. So now I'm focused on just burning away to get out of the scram range, hopefully before I lose all of my cap to where I'm just kind of dead in the water. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on right now, and still trying to clear drones, just again giving me every chance I can to survive. If you check the damage logs, you can see I'm not really taking a ton of damage from the missiles, you know, maybe 100, 200 per volley. So the missile TD is definitely doing its job, and then right as I'm about to cap out, or right as I cap out, I'm able to drift just out of scram range and then warp off. Even though I didn't win or kill anything, you know, you gotta risk it for the biscuit, and you know, just have fun. So this is not a Stabber Fleet Issue clip, this is a Vagabond clip. This is a polarized Vagabond, and it's fit very similarly to the Stabber Fleet. So this actually starts where I've actually been running across this particular pilot, and he always flies around in an AT ship. And so I just decided, you know, let's just try it. We'll just ram into it because he was offering a 1v1 in local. And, you know, it's a Vagabond. It's really cheaply fit, so I don't really care. I was like, well, let's just see what happens. So he's about 30-40 kilometers off me when I land, which I just assumed, oh, I'm not going to catch them with an afterburner fit. And then a Lachesis lands, which wasn't part of the fight. It was just a random pilot that came in, so it kind of threw me off. And actually, after rewatching the footage, I was like, I was actually kind of close to that Tiamat. I should have just tried to scram them. I might have gotten lucky. But instead, during the fight, I thought I was farther away from the Tiamat, and so I just turned around and went right for the Lachesis, because I was like, well, I'm going to die anyway. I might as well kill something while I'm here. So the Vagabond is fit with a large shield extender and then a extra large ancillary shield booster. Nothing fancy. It's just basically doing like 1100 DPS and having a very brief burst tank to try to capitalize on that DPS. And at this point, I'm just slowly whittling down this Lachesis while the Tiamat kind of hits me. And, again, going back over the recording and looking over everything, even if I happen to have captured that Tiamat, there's a good possibility I would have been capped out before I would have been able to kill him. But I got some amusement out of the local drama, and I killed a Lachesis that had like a bling point or something like that. So, not the end of the world. And plus, I got a kill that has a Tiamat on it. It's just me not killing a Tiamat, it's him killing me. And like the Stabber fleet issue, you can kind of see how that carries over to the Svipul. So the Svipul's also utilizing the tracking disruptor, AB Scram Web. Again, same thing, this is primarily being used in Nullsec. And with a lot of these polarized fits, I'm trying to find ships that are not utilized that much, or people maybe underestimate, which I think also, again, synergizes really well with polarized fits. Because if you fly, let's say, a polarized Orthrus somewhere, what do you expect the response to be? Everyone in Nullsec hates Orthruses because they're predominantly assumed to be kitey. So they're going to bring, kind of max blob to deal with it, and now you have no tank to deal with any of the projection that they're going to be providing. So it's pretty much just kind of a easy suicide. So I'm focusing on ships that are not going to elicit that kind of response, where they're going to immediately undock just mega cancer blob. They're like, oh, it's a Svipul on scan. Who cares about that? I'll bring out a Hecate or something to go fight it. Same thing with like the Stabber fleet issue. As you saw, they brought out, we had the officer fit Vedmak that came out that didn't expect what happened on the gate. You had the Hick that came out, and all those other fights. So that's kind of what I'm going for with all these fits, and the Svipul is definitely underestimated. And with a polarized Svipul, especially when you're in sharpshooter mode, you're doing 713 DPS, which is, again, not expected out of the Svipul. And with the speed mode, so you're primarily, obviously, since you're polarized, the tank mode really has no benefit to you at all, so you really shouldn't be using it. The propulsion mode, though, is useful to mitigate. So if you're brawling and you need to keep your speed up, maybe you're fighting something that's using missiles, or you're just trying to make sure you're not getting hit with the combination of the afterburner and the tracking disruptor, then you can use a propulsion mode, and then you're doing about 535 DPS with heat. The fitting is a 400mm plate with an AAR. Again, you're not really, especially now that we're down in the destroyer level here, and we don't have any raw HP bonuses like the Crow did. We don't have a ton of HP to work with. We're about 3.9 thousand. So if anything gets a good beat on you, you're going to melt really fast. But the plate at least does give you a little bit of buffer. The AAR is mainly just a tank against drones. So once you've set up your orbit on whatever you've tackled, in most cases, things aren't going to hit you, or they're not going to apply well, and the primary incoming damage is going to be coming from drones. So this is just to make sure you don't get eaten up by drones and can focus on killing drones and then targeting the ship afterwards. Rigs is burst aerator for more DPS, a nano pump, and then a ACR for fitting. As you can see, we're a little bit tight on fitting here. You can go without a NOS if you don't have great fitting skills, but I think it's beneficial to have it in case they have a newt. You can at least keep tackle and prop up in most cases. But otherwise, you know, this is pretty fun to fly. I didn't get a ton of fights with it. It was a little difficult in some cases, but the couple fights I did get with it, I had a lot of fun, and I plan on taking it out again more, just to see what else I can get with it, just because pretty much everyone will engage a Svipul. So this fight starts with me in a system kind of annoying the locals. I'm not really doing anything. I'm just sitting there, which is enough to annoy the locals because I'm preventing them from ratting. So they warp down this Navy coercer, and so I just burn right at them. And I switch to my DPS mode, and I don't know if this guy was just AFK or if this was an alt, but he kind of melts before anything really happens. You know, granted I'm doing 700 DPS, but still, like, he doesn't even lock me. So, but this wasn't really the main event of the system. So shortly after I kill this coercer, then a Hecate appears, and with a Hecate I need to play a little bit differently. Obviously you don't want to be at 0 on a Hecate, especially not in a polarized fit. So I'm planning on scram kiting them. And even though Hecate in sharpshooter mode gets resistances to weapon disruptors, it's not complete immunity. So they still have some benefit, it's just not a lot. So it helps to mitigate just a little bit of that extra damage if he does happen to swap to null, which in most cases they don't. And I'm having to use barrage, and for the Svipul, you know, using barrage kind of sucks because you don't have an actual fall off bonus, you just have an optimal bonus. So the Svipul and autocannons don't synergize necessarily well, but it still works. You know, I still do decent damage, at least enough damage to kill the Hecate, but with it taking longer for me to kill him, this opens me up to a Loki now warping down and decloaking. So now I'm trying to kill this Hecate before the Loki points me, and I was probably being a little bit too standoffish here. I try to burn in a little bit so I can get a little bit more damage on him. I maybe should have just tried to burn right at him and just kind of finished off what whole structure he had left so I could warp out. But I didn't, and so I ended up getting tackled by the Loki right as I killed the Hecate. And kind of similar to the Crow fight, I was like, well, I'm tackled, I might as well see if I can burn in on the Loki and you know, see if I can actually do anything. And in this case, this Loki's ham fit, so he is able to actually apply a little bit of damage to me, and because I don't have my missile guidance disruptor, you know, I'm not mitigating quite as much, but I'm staying in propulsion mode, and this is at least allowing me to mitigate a little bit of that damage. But it's still a bit of a struggle. However, the other thing here that's happening is this Loki pilot, I don't know what happens. He stopped shooting me for a while. And he's also burning away from me, so I actually had to kind of quote unquote do a slingshot on him, even though I'm only going like 500 meters a second, but you know, it's nullsec things, I guess. So I'm able to actually tackle him with a little bit of back and forth, kill some of the drones, and again, for whatever reason, he just stops shooting me with his missiles. He might have been reloading, I'm not entirely sure. I do make a mistake here because initially he was shooting me with missiles, and I was staying in propulsion mode to mitigate the damage, and I didn't immediately notice he stopped shooting me, and I didn't switch to my damage mode. I don't know if that would have mattered here, you know, because then he starts reapplying missiles on me, but I'm finding that I'm actually kind of tanking him okay. You know, he's still whittling me down, but between the barely usable repairer, I'm kind of sustaining just a little bit, maybe just enough to where I can kill him. Maybe not. It's kind of a tough one to determine, but unfortunately, before that can happen, the Hecate pilot warps back in and he kills me. And now on to the battleships. So this is a So I use actually two different ships here, but I'm just going to cover one of them because they're essentially the same. So I use a T1 Apocalypse, and then this is the Navy Apocalypse. So the Navy Apocalypse is going to be the one I'm going to go over, but fundamentally they are both identical. The only difference is that outside of the actual EHP amount, or hit point amount, the Navy Apocalypse gets an extra low, which I have just put a large armor repairer in. This is mainly just to function as, one, as a way to heal myself in between fights, over a long period of time. And two, while I'm actually in a fight, it can provide a constant or sustainable repair amount. Obviously, a standard Tech 2 large armor repairer is not going to be tanking any damage. It's just to try to extend my hit points for as long as possible. Since I have such a large pool to work from, getting an extra 920 HP repaired every 10-12 seconds is at least something. Yeah, I could have put another plate in it, or I could have put another mag stab in it, but I'd rather have this just because of the extra utility it offers in between fights. And for the most part, with like a fourth mag stab, you're dealing with a lot of stacking penalties, and then a fifth plate, while it would fit fine, the thing is already incredibly painful to align and warp off in. I didn't want to make it any worse. So diving into the fitting, obviously this is kind of an oddball because I'm going against everything that is a Mar. So the APOC and the Navy Apocalypse are both bonus to lasers, but they have no actual direct damage bonuses. So it's just large energy turret tracking speed, large energy turret optimal range, which for a polarized ship really provides no benefit. You could argue, well, you could get better tracking on your lasers. However, large blasters by default track better than large lasers with a tracking bonus. So that's why it's better to go with blasters. On top of that, you have more DPS from these blasters than you would with lasers. And obviously the other part here is we have 4 heavy newts. So if you remember my torpedo video, I think it was my second torpedo video, I flew a torpedo Rokh, which had 4 heavy newts. So this is kind of building off of that. And essentially you are utilizing the heavy newts to shut down anything active, and then you finish them off with the 4 weapons. Now, in the case of the Rokh was not polarized. It just used normal torpedo damage, and it did 700 and 900 DPS. This is polarized, and because I don't have any launcher slots to fit torpedoes on it, I opted for polarized blasters. And we get to a little over 1,000 once you plug in pyro. This is a very straightforward ship. You just kind of roam it out in nullsec, park it somewhere, wait for someone to come to you and either shut them down, or you have plenty of utility to get away in case the inevitable nullsec blob comes. And you have the 4 heavy newts, so again, not just for shutting down active tank targets, but these are also very useful for capping out tackle, so interceptors, interdictors, cruisers, anything like that. And then whatever just has you long pointed, you can just micro warp drive away from. So even though you're heavily plated, you do have a lot of utility to escape things with. HP is 106,000, which is fine. That's kind of the goal I always want to try and hit for if I'm doing a polarized battleship. For the T1 Apocalypse, I think it's like 90,000 or 95,000 with the same fit. So not a huge difference, but having the extra 10,000 HP is nice. And yeah, other than that, this is, again, it's straightforward. Tackle stuff, kill stuff if you can, get out with the utility of your newts and the micro jump drive. So in this fight, I ran across a Rokh that was, I think it was in a mining site. It was in just one of the random warpable mining beacons. And for some reason, he was just shooting structures in there. I don't know what he was doing. I wouldn't say this is really a great fight. I just found it amusing. Plus, you know, I was able to warp in at range and then just activate the micro jump drive and jump right on top of him, which is always a fun thing to do when you can get it right. You know, he locks me and tries to shoot me, but he's a railgun fit. So, you know, he does hit me, but once I get near him, it doesn't matter anymore. And then with the heavy newts, it slowly breaks all of his tank mods, so then it's just a lot easier for me to kind of break through it. And you're witnessing, you know, just damage mitigation in a quad-plated apocalypse. Not a whole lot else to say here. It, you know, goes pretty much as expected when you're dealing with a brawling ship on top of a long-range ship. And this fight was against a Proteus, a Legion, and a Paladin, but initially it was just a Proteus. So the Proteus was following me for a little bit. He kind of kept landing a little bit after I would land on a gate, so I saw him coming. So I'll go ahead and warp to an ESS because I was thinking, well, maybe he's a Sino Proteus. And, you know, this is a safe area. And then right after that, the Legion follows him, but the Legion lands at 0, the Proteus landed right on top of me, which is kind of perfect because it split their DPS, and the Legion ends up having to warp off again. This is a cap battery fit Proteus, so he actually does have decent newt resistance. You know, so it's just kind of a waiting game here to fully cap him out. It just takes a little bit longer than expected. Local just spiked up by 1, so this is their Paladin, so again, typical Nullsec fashion. Every fight isn't a fight until there's at least one Marauder involved. And so at this point, you know, thankfully the gate is a ways away from the ESS, so I still have plenty of time to deal with the Proteus. And around this time, I think, is when the Proteus's cap actually starts running low. Or at least on the next newt cycles, you start seeing the actual cap drain amount show like 30 and then 0. So he's essentially capped out, and to be honest, I'm slowly willing his tank down. It's just he has a reactive armor hardener. This is a full tank fit Proteus, so no damage, which is why it's just taking me so long because his reactive is fully shifted. But once all of his tank mods shut off, then he pretty much gets insta-popped. At this point, then I'm trying to get the loot, and I kind of fumble on getting the loot and get all the non-expensive stuff. But thankfully the Paladin, he lands like 50 kilometers away, and they don't end up looting any of this, so I just come back after they leave, and or actually I come back when they're trying to camp me in a gate, and then I steal the loot and get back off, because by then everything else had also filtered in, and it was no longer just a Legion and a Paladin. So this last bit is not actually a fight. This is just something that I thought was really amusing. So I was on my way back from the Null Roam. I was getting into Lowsec and just kind of calling it a day. And inevitably in Lowsec, you're going to run across an Arazu. And the Arazu gets neuted out. I'm sure he wasn't expecting that out of a Navy apocalypse. So I was like, all right, cool. I can leave now because he's not gonna Sino on me, or he might, but he doesn't have any way to hold me, so, you know, he's just getting shot by gate guns. So I kind of give it a little bit to see if maybe I can kill him with Null, but he ends up warping off, so I was like, alright, whatever. I cut it off, but I ended up warping to a station and system, and then in this system there's just a Naglfar sitting on the undock with no one piloting it. And I was like, alright then, so I go ahead and undock in my pod, jump in the Naglfar, and then dock the Naglfar. I'm like, oh, sweet. Free 3.5 build just sitting on the undock. There's some guy just circling around it in a Helio, so I don't know if it was his and he was admiring it, but it's mine now. Anyway, thanks for watching.